Okay. So we're going to look today at the intro to the 29th path of the Qabalistic tree of life, associated with the letter Qoph. And this is part 1, the intro and the cerebellum. So if we start, we can look at the left-hand side and do a quick review. We started with Malkuth, the kingdom or earth, moving up to Yesod, the treasure house of images, dreams, and intuitions, associated with the planet of the moon, and Hod, the absolute perfect intelligence, the logical mind and waking consciousness associated with the planet of Mercury. And now we're over on the right side, looking at the path that goes from Malkuth to Netzach, which is called bodily intelligence, and it's represented by the sign of Pisces. The affirmation is, I will evolve to become a worthy vessel of God. So if you imagine, visualize the tree of life above your head, with your head being Malkuth, and you're looking up through your third eye, and then to your left is Hod as you face the tree of life, as you look at the tree of life. And it's going up, and you have Hod on the left, and you have Yesod as a sphere in the middle, and then you have Netzach on the right. And all of these spheres appear as white, and the pathways appear as white. And we will illumine the pathway from where we are to the sphere of Netzach with a reddish purple color. And with your consciousness held in such a way, bring into mind the affirmation, I will evolve to become a worthy vessel of God. And consider what that might mean for you. In particular, what a worthy vessel would be. Perhaps in terms of a healthy body, or acceptance and pride towards your physical vessel, or perhaps you are a vessel to be filled with something. Perhaps it is virtue and service in accordance with your purpose, or perhaps it is just a state of openness that is strong enough to hold the energies of spirit. And with this intention and these ideas and this visualization in mind, hold that while in the feet and the breath, in the axis mundi.
The 29th path is the corporeal intelligence, so called because it forms every body which is formed beneath the whole set of worlds and the increment of them. Sepher Yetzirah, 29th path.
So here are the attributes of Qoph. The back of the head and the cerebellum, there is an image of the letter The Hebrew divine name is El, but we will be adding a shira to that to represent both masculine and feminine. The stone is moonstone. We have a couple examples of moonstone on the altar.
And your necklace.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I want to unshare for a minute to share some of the different things that we have on our altar. So we have, here's the moonstone that's on the end of my mala when I do my mantras. Here's another moonstone that if you have any moonstone jewelry, so now would be a really good time to pull it out and wear it for a little while so you can attune yourself with the energies of that. Sorry. Here we go. This is a really nice one. I like that piece. Pisces is the sign that's associated with that. So here's an image. This is a gorgeous image. It's there we go. It's actually glittery, but you can't see the glitter. And this was done by local artist Barbara Seamus. It's called Infinity. Amber is the incense that is associated as well. So we have some amber little, so we're using amber the incense, not amber the stone. Those are two different things, which we will actually be discussing later. And do you want to tell them about your bunnies?
So for the path of the moon, rabbits are a very lunar animal. So I brought out my rabbits, one of my rabbit statues.
One of his many, many rabbit figurines.
Some people see a rabbit in the moon. I do. If you look a certain way on a full moon, you can see a big bunny. And they also are very lunar in that they have a 30-day, 28-day gestation period. And they can even become pregnant again in 28 days, at least the wild ones. So a rabbit is an animal that, to me, is very tied with the moon, the tarot card that's associated with the path of Qoph.
And here's another little piece of amber resin. And then I just found a thing in the appropriate color. A thing of no purpose, perfect for an altar.
Very pretty.
Yeah. Let's go back to our slideshow. Okay, just to keep in mind that as we progress along the path, the optical effects are illusions of fear. So if you notice that as a result of doing these path workings that we're going to do, and I think all the little individual teachings that we're giving are mini path workings in and of themselves. But if you notice some fear coming up, or you notice some confusion or some obscurity, consider that that's part of the eliminatory process of doing this work. That's something to be expected and anticipated and looked for, and then understood as clearing. It's just, we're going to clear. That's what it's going to be. So, looking forward to seeing how the path develops. Bodily reproduction, giving materiality to every shape, psychic development and intuition, and a mind-body balance. Those are the key attributes. So I have to admit, although I'm not sure I'm on the correct slide, I think I am. I have to admit that when I started to think about studying cerebellum, I wasn't super excited about it. I have some ideas about the nature of ultimate reality and how it relates to our corporeal world. And so I've had these for a really long time. Some preset ideas, some preconceived ideas about the idea that I could never perceive ultimate reality. I could never really pursue my spirituality if I was studying a mechanistic universe reduced to its smallest elements. So that was the first thing that I had to confront, was thinking about that. A little confusion and obscurity. But apparently, these are important elements for Qoph. And I am curious enough to try to find out why there is this association. So here are some things that I found. The cerebellum. Cerebellum means little brain, and it's located at the back of the head. And you can see that it's highlighted in a three-dimensional image here. We have a little bit more of a rough drawing here with basic general brain structures. There's two structures that are associated with the back of the head. There's the cerebellum, which is down here, and it's you can't see, but it comes up higher. And then there's the occipital lobe, and it didn't take me but like 2 seconds of looking into this before it was very clear that the Kabbalists were probably going more towards the cerebellum than they were the occipital lobe, which is involved with vision. We did talk a bit about the limbic system and subconscious and unconscious functions of the brain, but those are actually, if you come up the brainstem, they're inside here, kind of circling around the brainstem, is where we find some of these older, more unconscious functions. The cerebellum looks like a separate part of the brain. It has several layers, most notably an outer cortex and an inner nuclei. And it makes up 10% of the total volume of the brain, but it contains anywhere from 50 to 80% of the neurons in the entire brain, which is estimated to be in the hundreds of millions. There's a lot of activity going on in a very densely packed spot. And so I'd like to show you where that is on your body. If you take your hand and you put it at the base of your neck and you run it up that curvature, you will encounter a different curvature going in the other direction, beginning to go around the top and the front of the spine. So this is where the skull opens up to allow the brainstem to go, the spine, to allow the brainstem to go down through the spine. And so this is the area where your cerebellum is housed. And this is a very interesting area in the Taoist systems. They refer to it as the jade pillow. They had special exercises called playing the jade pillow, playing the sacred drum. And it has a lot to do with the way that the cerebrospinal fluid goes up and down the body. It's considered to be a sacral pump and part of the communication of your energy as it flows through your central channel. Who has a cerebellum? Oh my goodness. See, I think this really contributed to my dislike of studying brain structures, but I thought you might find it interesting to look at the variety. So 420 million years ago, the bony fish arrived on the planet, where we figured it out that the bony fish had arrived. We have fossils. And bony fish today have a cerebellum. It's believed that they have, we don't know what their brain looked like back at that time, but they haven't changed a whole lot in 420 million years. So we have this elongated brain structure with the cerebellum being this number 4 structure right here. Hopefully you can see my pointer right above the stem. Moving to a slightly more complex creature, the rabbit. The cerebellum is number 3 right here. And then to a pigeon, where we have more upright brain structure similar to humans, and number 3 is the cerebellum. Just a couple more. This shows the similarities. This was obviously somebody's presentation that I snagged and referenced at the end. But the cerebellum is this orange disc right here in the frog, which is an amphibian, and it's the slightly larger orange area in the alligator, which is a reptile. They're not the same, but they're very similar, and you can see the brain structures are very similar as well. So now we can look at the history of the human cerebellum and how our understanding of it and what it does has evolved over time. The earliest descriptions that we have in Western civilization, just looking at Western civilization, we start with the Roman physician Galen, who was alive around 129 AD. And he observed that this region of the brain was responsible for motor movement. This is an image of Aristotle, not Galen, and one of his depictions of the brain anatomy. And he referred to the cerebellum as the parencephalus. So the other lobes of the brain, the cerebrum and its associated organs, I guess it's just one big organ of the cerebrum and its 2 lobes, are the encephalus at the time, and he referred to the cerebellum as the parencephalus. It's a really fascinating image, really interesting. In 1504, Leonardo da Vinci was creating detailed pictures as a study of human anatomy. This does not look like he got his representation of the brain from dissection, as Aristotle did. It looked like he was imagining in his brilliant mind what the brain anatomy might be. He began referring to the parencephalus as the cerebellum. This was where the word cerebellum came into play, and it was Latin for little brain. And at this point, we started culturally, people who were looking at the brain began to make a distinction between the upper lobes and the lower lobes of the brain. So there's 4. There's right, left, in the top and the bottom. On the right, we see an image from a 19th century medical book and an item that was sold on eBay for probably quite a bit. It's a 19th century brain model that was used in medical schools. They were studying the cerebellum at this time through the process of ablation, which is using light, heat, and lasers. Today, they use light, heat, and lasers to basically make areas of the brain no longer functional, and then seeing what happened as a result. This was what led to treatments for tumors and epilepsy today. Now we have those light, heat, and lasers guided by MRI devices. So awkward and clumsy, but useful, ultimately. So based on these techniques, it was determined that the cerebellum was responsible for voluntary, conscious motor coordination, where the body is in space and time, and how to consciously operate the mechanism of the bodily vehicle for posture, balance, and equilibrium, which I find to be very much in keeping with the energy of Qoph as I understand it right now. It's actually Qoph, Qoph, like a kissing sound. Qoph, Qoph. So here's a modern MRI image. For centuries, the cerebellum was considered by our Western experts to be the seat of non-thinking activities that had nothing to do with cognition, like walking up the stairs, writing with a pen, cooking on the stove, and Zumba. But we know that that is no longer true. The cerebellum and the cerebrum have a very complex interplay and trade messages back and forth. So we know that the cerebellum is receiving information from basically every aspect of the nervous system, including the brain stem, the spinal cord, and the cerebrum. And I would also add that we've discovered other organs of perception that seem to have interplay with the various functions of cognition that occur in the brain as opposed to the mind. We have discovered a gut brain. We have discovered sensory receptors in the blood that relay information back to the brain. And there's a whole field of looking at this mind-body connection, that our cognition is not just something that happens here in this region or here in this region, but all throughout every single piece of physical space that we have in complex ways that we're only really beginning to understand. All of that information goes into the cerebellum, all of it. So it has a lot of work to do. In the 1990s, we started doing functional imaging studies involving electroencephalography, EEGs, magnetoencephalography, MEGs, functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRIs, positron emission tomography, or PET, and photon-based microscopy, all with computer-generated algorithms. And so now we can really look at these aspects of the brain and how they're firing off during various functions and activities. So a lot of really interesting studies that are coming up. The emerging research is looking at its role in processing language and mental imagery. This is the very subtext of the subconscious, this background kaleidoscope of information that's available to us when we quiet ourselves enough to observe. Some of that imagery is coming out of the cerebellum. Attention, learning, pain and reward responses, attraction and aversion. Very heart of Buddhism.
Yes.
Mood, fear, and addiction all have activity in the cerebellum. And I want to talk a little bit about proprioception. So this is not the cerebellum. It's one of those organs that I was talking about. It's the skin. And so when we think about the senses, we typically think about there being 5 senses. But we're starting to get into so much nuance with regards to what these senses are actually doing that we can recognize at least 8. With touch being different than proprioception. So here is a diagram of the skin where we can see that there are apparati that are responsible for perceiving pain, heat, and cold, pressure, touch. There's several here that are responsible for touch. And so consider that we have organs inside of our bodies, inside of our skin, organelles, or whatever they would be called, these little, very small receptors that tell us where we are in space and time, where we are in proximity to other people, whether it's hot or cold. Where's my stuff? In the bony fish, going back to the bony fish, one of the interesting things that they found with regards to the bony fish and its cerebellum function and its sense of how movement is, and I think we figured this out a while ago, is that they're so well developed in the bony fish, their sense of proprioception, their capacity to be able to perceive tactily through their skin all of these varieties of experience: pressure, movement, pain, temperature, light, proximity, and probably vibration, that they consider it to be their primary sense organ, which makes a whole lot of sense, that this is how fish are going to communicate with one another. Perceptually through the skin. We have really shut that experience off. One of the big things that I do in my therapeutic practice is I try to help people turn this sense back on so that they can reclaim their capacity to perceive their environment and increase their sensory perception through how they feel in their body. We call this somatic therapy. It's somatics, body-oriented psychotherapy. And there's some kind of interesting way that perhaps the cerebellum helps us understand the link with, that this ties into emotion, because emotion is a felt sense in the body as well. We can feel our emotions physiologically. There is always a perception of sense going on in the body when we have an emotion, whether we dial into it and pay attention to it or not. So I, of course, think it's a good idea to increase that capacity as we go forward. I think that's one of our really missing senses. I call it the back door to really resolving a lot of places that we might find ourselves stuck, places that we might find ourselves having difficulty evolving. So it's very practical. We're very practical. We're very in the physical world, yet we're dealing with a lot of these kind of subtextual things that we don't consider to be our primary ways of interacting with the physical world. And my final slide here is taken from Christopher Berglund's article in Psychology Today. This guy really loves the cerebellum. He really gets into studying it. More power to him. He states, my hypothesis is that maximizing brain function and human potential can be achieved by optimizing the interconnectivity between each of the brain's hemispheres, which he has diagrammed out here now, I suspect that optimal brain function is obtained when all four of the hemispheres are working together in perfect harmony at an electrical, chemical, and architectural level. I believe that a peak state of consciousness occurs when every nook and cranny of each of your brain's four hemispheres are working together in synchronicity. I call this a state of superfluidity because it represents zero friction, zero entropy, and zero viscosity between thought, action, and emotion.
May we be encompassed by the power of the name Adonai Melech, and established in the place of Malkuth, the foundation. May the portal of the 29th path be open to us, and may we journey thereon in the power of the name El, to the gate of the Sphere of Netzach, victory, and in the name Yahweh Sabaoth. May the gate of Netzach be open to us, and may we be firmly established in the wonders of that sphere.